Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live on a Monday, March 21st, 24th. Jesus, time flies, 3:06 p.m. Crypto spring, much like a DeFi summer 2020. It's certainly not going to repeat like it did in 2020. Completely different socioeconomic situation going on back then, obviously, and a completely different monetary environment. But there is one comparable thing, and that is presented in technical data. Dollar down still stands. We're not dollar down today, but it's interesting because we see the strength across the crypto space, in my opinion. So, in some regard, almost in all regard, pricing is forward looking through all the noise. So, we could see, and we should expect to see, early signs of favorable crypto conditions, even though there's a bit of dollar strength, because then the larger actor base of all participants, for instance, is expecting the DXY to hold as resistance the weekly 100. It's a bet. So obviously, you either have folks that are on the right side of the bet or the wrong side of the bet. So I fall into the camp of I expect this to hold as resistance. Now it might pop up above. This was a massive leg down from the 107.35 line right into the 103.81 line too. I mean, it's literally leg to leg of remarkable levels. Those are two historic levels that we discussed for quite some time. Isn't it quite fascinating that the 103.81 line was basically support, at least candle body close support, and basically the 107.35 line is a very obvious level of resistance? That there's no coincidence in data. These two levels are remarkably significant from a historical standpoint, and we clearly see that as the chart presents. As I said, I expect this 100 SMA to hold. I expect further downward directionality for the DXY. Notice how we come into the week with move down at 94.5 minus 1.25%, albeit this Monday we're positive 1.91% territory on 10-year yields. So depending on how the rest of bond market volatility shapes up for the remainder of the week, we could see a pop and move. We'll see what happens. 100, 105, and that's going to be depreciative, introducing volatility across the crypto space. But no less, at least from a technical standpoint, it is promising that we eventually see this 82 line breach to the downside. And that's generally the levels that we're looking for. Not curve, but DXY, looking for a breach of the 200 SMA on the weekly to the downside, as well as a level of 82.43 for the move indicator to the downside. And that is basically favorable crypto conditions territory. DeFi spring, so to speak. So, everything in this game of investing is patience. Time does the work. And that's the most important thing to remember, in my opinion. And as I engage with these markets, I'm in position. It's not the concept of am I allocated or unallocated. You follow the rules. Own more assets. Great. Rule number two, know when to stop owning assets. Great. Achieved. I have what I own, and it's going to be what it's going to be based on the market conditions. The market sets your total net worth. Everything else is a separate consideration, such as receipts, which is exactly why we went through our exploration of the Voter Escrow Partnership. While it was a good idea, and on the surface, from an IRC 731 standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Uh, Unfortunately, it quite collapses under a very specific provision in IRC 702. There's no way, shape, or form getting around this language. Everything in law is about words and language and case precedent as well, not memorandums or notices or agency interpretation, IRS interpretation. That's them interpreting the words of Congress. Ultimately, we are not paying taxes because of the IRS. We pay taxes because of Congress. And the IRS is responsible for um, ensuring that the words of Congress are respected. They are the tax collector. They don't define taxation. Congress does. Okay, so the words are very important. And basically, what I do, what I like to do, is I break down everything word by word, the semantics of words, the definitions of words, the interactions of words across acts, subchapters, and parts, and what have you, to craft what I see as potentially favorable entity structuring. And that's perfectly fine. We've gone over this a couple of times. I'll share with you a quote that is meaningful. Um, Form absent exceptional circumstance reflects substance. So form meaning how you structure things. And unless there's some exceptional circumstance, there's substance to that form. And persons may adopt any lawful means for the lessening of the burdens of taxes, which in one form or another may be laid upon property or profits. This is all established case law. There's more than just this. But even in the Internal Revenue Manual, the most important distinguishing characteristic is avoidance versus evasion. Now, form facilitates avoidance. Avoidance basically means you are reporting everything and you have a declaration of purpose, intent, structure, and an A275 form, and you're stating this is the way it is. This is the way I see it. And that's fine. Evasion is very simple to understand. If you don't report or you omit information or you're not forthcoming, that's it. So this is perfectly fine. Avoidance of taxes is not a criminal offense, period. And the attempt to reduce, avoid, minimize, or alleviate taxes is legitimate. By legitimate means is permissible, period. This is all blanket statements. So this type of exercise that we've gone through looking at the words of the law from Congress to create an entity's form with substance is overwhelmingly reasonable. Means it's a good exercise because we sure as hell know um, it's not that fun come April or October if you file an extension or whatnot. Um, this is even worse. IRC 702C, gross income of a partner. In any case where it's necessary to determine the gross income of a partner for purposes of this title, such amount shall include his distributive share of gross income of the partnership. There is, you know, I was very happy with the structure of the memorandum as presented, but unfortunately, new language or language you did not account for comes into the picture, and there's literally no way, shape, or form of getting around this. Determination of gross income. All right, gross income IRC 61, and that gross income shall include distributive share. So this particular phrase is quite straightforward. Partners distributive share. Okay, okay. So that's that. So at the top of the memorandum, confirm that this idea is invalidated. Sorry, folks, for you individual taxpayers out there. This is not a valid structure. How to present the relationship between crypto protocols and what you do as a partnership. It just doesn't work. Certainly does not work out favorably. So we're back to it just being novel territory. And this is crypto, and you are getting shit and staking and locking and voter escrow, and it's not consistent or at least favorably consistent with traditional financial structuring, is what it is. Anything else interesting from this memorandum still stands. This is a whole nother ball game. The property receipts, but this is not an individual taxpayer. This is a trust. You got individual taxpayers, you got corporate taxpayers, and you got trust, and they have different rules. And for trust, there's an entire subchapter. So that subchapter interacts with the rules of individual taxpayers, producing potential form that, if you express substance, is quite reasonable. And it is semantically coherent. An interpretation of the words of Congress that favors a more friendlier um, environment for engaging in these kinds of financial activity. Suffice it to say, I was quite disappointed in this. It's not like I spent much time on it, but I did. It was like Friday. So today's Monday. So it's a couple of days over the weekend, probably a dozen or so hours. Um, but this is undeniable. Like I explored everything. I explored every semantic argument or consideration, but you know, uh, um, Glass versus the commissioner, a cession of wealth and clear dominion. There's no real way around this. It's just unambiguous. Other items of income gain a lot, particularly A7 and A8 in combination with the clause, general clause of A, and combined with C is just like, all right, what the hell am I supposed to do? Basically, a pass-through entity, all tax liabilities according to 701 are just, from an income standpoint, are passed to the partners. You know, remarkably similar to an S corp in some ways, absent the reporting obligations from a corporate standpoint. Diego's in the house. Good morning, Cap. Arrow, good morning. Can you please compare technicals of curve and convex? Let's take a look. All right, high level, weekly, 100 SMA below, comparable, curves in a stronger position, as you can see here. So comparable in that you have a higher low. So here's your level. I mean, it's a decent level. These are wicks. I mean, you could do some candle body closes there. So you have a level, bit of an inverse head and shoulders at the bottom, but you have some really strong wicks through it. So that's not the cleanest type of inverse head and shoulders. Not that I really like an inverse head and shoulders, but it is a higher low, even from the candle body as well as the candle body close. From a curve standpoint, it is a much prettier neckline. I mean, that's pretty interesting because that candle body close is less pronounced. It lines up pretty much with that candle body close, and you have this blow off bottom, so to speak, a much more cleanly formed inverse head and shoulders type structure, especially with wicks back in September of 2023 and even early in November 2022, somewhat aligning with the neckline by not much. This was 40 cents and the neckline's at 36. You're talking 4 cent difference. Albeit that 4 cents on 40 cents is 10%. So but this is even less. And then there you go. This is a more favorable technical structure. Technical structure is only part of the equation. That is always important to recognize, but that is at least a relatively high level comparison from a technical standpoint between curve and convex. You're probably left with narrative type of assessment and evaluation if you're considering portfolio structure, in which case it's probably still a toss up in some regards. There's a distinct narrative in many regards. One of the core components of the narrative is that convex is governance. VLCVX is driven by vote rentals, and that's the vast majority of the revenue for convex exposure, whereas Curve offers both vote rental flows as well as broad access to the entire cash flow of the protocol. For convex does surface that cash flow, but the problem is that cash flow of Curve is diluted across the entire convex um, outstanding token supply. So that has always been a reality of the flows associated with convex as compared to Curve. This comes back to just my tendency for preferring the base layer because everything else, a derivative, introduces additional considerations and complexity, and in this instance, dilution across the entire convex token supply. And that is just something that further reinforced my not apprehension, but tendency to just focus on the base layer and appreciate everything else as additive and supportive of the overall ecosystem. In this case, the Curve Federation. Snoke, how are we feeling today? Excited for the near future? I feel pretty good about the data. There's still great uncertainty in my mind, even though I have a general expectation of what plays out. I mean, look at total three today, crank it at 2.64%. I mean, this is basically a retest, if you notice, a retest at least of 2024 highs. You deserve a horizontal level. So this is actually quite constructive. Rejection, 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 support. We did have support, so this is very early. We had support back here. Bear in mind, this is 2021 territory, and this is after an absolute parabolic move to the upside. So this support failed on the 50 SMA and the weekly. This is a clear expression of support. So thus far, what we have from a confluence standpoint is a clear expression of support for the entire non-Bitcoin Ethereum ecosystem, investment, the investment landscape of support on the 50 SMA and the weekly. And it's not a parabolic move. We haven't had a significant expansion or monetization of this crypto space. This is a very interesting level. We still haven't meaningfully breached all-time highs set back in November of 2021. But if this is the retrace that happens to be a retest of the resistance set in April 2024, which coincides with the triple rejection back in 2021, I think this is quite constructive. So to answer your question, Snow, this type of chart is very comforting from a technical standpoint. Bitcoin is a hell of a dominant son of a bitch. Man, that is a strong chart, but that is one heck of a wick that the, you can't tell for shit what this chart's going to do. Um, Clearly, that's a hell of a series of higher lows, just basically an upward trajectory slope. And you want to see some sort of invalidation. I wouldn't even draw a trend line. Trend lines are the weakest of technical structures. I look for moving averages and levels as primary points of confluence. So what you want to see is a nice, meaningful breach of the 50 SMA on the weekly because the last interaction with it was support. They see a breach of it, a breakdown, then the 50 SMA holding as resistance and a lower low, the trifecta of bearish confluence, you have a nice gut instinct or a sentiment of continuation to the downside. So clearly, we don't have that yet. Bitcoin obviously back up at $88,000 after so much emotion, so much sentiment that people go through when it goes down. Is the top it? I mean, literally, you see the headlines. Is the top? There hasn't been a cycle. There hasn't been a market cycle. There just hasn't because that is driven by the global supply of dollars, and there has not been an expansion of the global supply of dollars. But inevitably, the global supply of dollars needs to expand to accommodate refinancing obligations. And we're not talking about the United States, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the entire goddamn planet. So the whole system doesn't work unless it expands, and ultimately it needs to expand cyclically. And it just so happens we're in 2025, 3 years post 2022, and the system is likely, more likely than less likely, on the verge of engaging in the required and necessary capital expansion in order to finance outstanding debt obligations. Move back at 94.5. Constructive. Let's see what happens during the week. Tomorrow you retrace this one positive 1.86% to the upside on yields, and you get back down to 4.2. It turns out break even. It's down like 1.5% tomorrow, and we should hopefully speculatively have a relatively flat move, and then we could see further continuation to the downside. The market is driven by these mechanics: debt market volatility, long end duration, U.S. Treasury volatility, and relative currency pricing surrounding the dollar, of which DXY gives a decent reference, particularly because we see a clear relationship to previous crypto market, quote unquote, bull cycles back in 16, 17 and 20 and 21. Yay, good morning. Always a pleasure. If you're on X or YouTube, please feel welcome to ask any questions. More than happy to talk about any topic. Always appreciate it, Captain. Yes, indeedy. And it's always a pleasure. Arrow thoughts on various protocols. Frat opting to create their own L1 versus staying as an L2. That's all speculative territory. We're in such an early stage of these crypto markets. And when I say early stage, I mean 2020 and 2021 was the start of anything anyone's thinking about. So referring to those types of protocols coming online in 20 and 21 as dino coins completely misses the point. Everything that launched in 2020 and 2021, Aave, the big boy, any DeFi protocol, Curve, even Balancer for what it's worth. All these boys are brand spanking new. Takes a long time for businesses to catch because there's a whole market, there's a whole acceptance of markets by already existing markets, and there's a whole network of capital flows and trust that needs to emerge before capital really starts to monetize a new market. So everything is brand new. Everything from 2020 is brand spanking new. There's no such thing as dino coins. That's an unreasonable bias. So Frax started very early. What was it, late 2020 or 2021? And they have decided to go this path with an Alt L1 instead of an L2. But they're building and have many components of what can be considered a superchain type narrative, very modular type of chain that offers a great deal of infrastructure that is on very popular chains and certainly appealing from a narrative standpoint. Has proven to be a great example of the greatest tech is not necessarily the greatest investment. But what can I say? I was an investor back in 20 when it launched, literally shortly after it launched. So I retained that position. First off, that's something I'm quite fond of. Folks shy away very much from lock positions, perpetual positions, which I define as ownership. I bought something rather than a position. So I'm quite fond of that choice back then. And I forced to just watch the market decide what it wants to do with it. The market decides how well it monetizes and what it's worth and how productive it is. And nothing I could do can change that. And nothing has been invalidated from a narrative standpoint. Surely there has been a bit of opportunity cost associated with engaging with it, especially if I was able to exit it at its all-time high price, which was, oof, goodness gracious, that was a nice bucket of capital. But that's just not the way I engage with markets. And that's something that allows me to sleep well at night. Is that a contradiction? Not capitalizing on the top, not selling the top. But that's not a contradiction for the captain. I'm quite comfortable. And that the methodology just redefines everything. It's an ownership, not a position. That money was spent, it is gone, and in its stead, I own something in perpetuity. Yo, Tam, good evening, Captain. Much a pleasure, much a pleasure. I don't mean to be too political, but have you seen the Atlantic article today? What was that? The Houthis versus Europe, or rather, administration wanting Europe to pay. Frankly, that actually makes a great deal of sense, albeit it's not the traditional positioning for the United States. Um, I'm not too fond of tradition. I'm not too fond of the status quo. I would imagine a lot of folks aren't too fond of the status quo. So, generally speaking, it's a bit confrontational. It's clearly not expected, but it is I mean, I'm a fan of the concept of investments, meaning if you're investing something, you should get something, or if you're providing a service, there should be compensation. So technically, from a mechanical standpoint, It makes sense from a business standpoint. It makes sense. Now, classic argument, classic argument about the current administration is: do you operate a country like a business? And that is a tough question that only time will tell how that plays out, because clearly this is a business play. We are providing a service with regard to free and open access to the seas, something we've provided since post World War II. And whoever uses that probably should compensate for the amount of capital that was spent ensuring the free and open seas associated with that geopolitical contention. I'm not too against the idea. Clearly, I have a moral and ethical side to me, um, but it did have an expense associated with the actions that were taken. So, what does that mean? I mean, that's the question that only time could tell if good choices are made going forward and what are good choices. It's two sides to the coin. Either the nation continues to be this altruistic entity that just gives away everything we own and taxes us to all hell to just give it away outside the country, or something different is done. Now, I posted an interesting tweet the other day. Let's see if I can find it because I think that was like Friday, and I sure as hell post a lot. Yeah, this is a good one. While everyone's fighting over narratives and ideologies, the root of everything reduces to: how do you feel about federal taxation? So everyone on the left loves, Medicare, Medicaid, EBT, and helping people and donations and social programs. And I appreciate that. I have grandparents as well, and these are all things that affect everyone's individual livelihoods. But that's great and all, but who's paying for it? So as much as there's no free lunch. So if something is going to get spent, it's got to be paid for. So as much as everyone has these ideas that are great and moral and ethical and literally socialist tendencies are ethical, Marxist socialism, this is reasonable. You need, I'm a humanitarian, share, equity, equality, beautiful ideas. But history says it doesn't necessarily work. And here's the point. Here's the point. Humans run on very simple code. We tend to be uh, um, we focus on ourselves, and the majority of folks are not thinking outside of themselves. The majority of folks are not giving. Majority of folks are not altruistic. Note how I preface these particular references to parts of society. Majority, minority. It's important to understand these scales and scopes. So all of these ideas, and this is the point, this is the most important point. They're arguing about relatively high level political positioning about how to structure the system, but ultimately all of their talking points on both sides reduced to a very simple fact: who the fuck is paying for it? And are you okay with that? Now that's when was it the ducks come home or the rooster crows or some shit? That's when the rubber hits the road. Oh yes, let's police the seas, and all right, who's gonna pay for it? Or all these social programs, who's gonna pay for it? Now, be all as altruistic as you want, but if you have to pay for it, that kind of is the perspective that's important. And this poll is literally everything that everyone's protesting about versus everything that the administration is doing. They feel about taxation, paid for the things that everyone's arguing about. Isn't this the type of thing? This is what we should be talking about. You see, this is why the captain does not find it easy to navigate society's talking points. Because you see how I talk to you, I cut right to the chase. I am a reductionist. I see signal through noise. I see the truth through the madness. And what I see is everyone squawking. But they're not talking about the actual point. They're completely missing the point. It's as if many things, maybe they're just regurgitating populist narrative, or maybe they don't have the reductionist capacity that I offer, and to see the signal through the noise, to see the true core argument. Now, 66% of people, albeit this is a microscopic poll, said taxation, federal taxation, local is different, although they blend and bleed over in some regards, but they see it as theft or appalling. A minority, a significant minority, see honorable and grateful. Now, I'm sure the truth is everyone sees a bit of a blend, exactly as the 0.1% says. That's a hell of a framing. Tax sentiment is the litmus test for ideology, not left versus right, but grateful versus robbed. How do you feel? Left or right? There's no such thing as left and right. It doesn't exist. There's people, and then there's money. That's it. Grateful versus robbed. Classic follow the incentives. Just who's paying for it? Most people feel both, depending on where the money actually goes. Now, that would change the equation. So, the reason you feel robbed is because you don't see a return of investment. Typically, when you buy something, you're getting a product, or you spend money, you're getting a meal or food. When you spend money, which is federal taxation, what are you getting? If you don't see it, you don't feel reciprocity. And that's clearly the sentiment expressed in the poll. If you don't feel and see what you're getting in return, you don't feel like you're getting your money's worth. So clearly, the vast majority see it's theft, but this is obviously a complicated topic, a political hot potato, and clearly a perspective that is lost in the noise of left versus right and all these talking points. Imagine going up to a Republican rally and saying, all right, how do you feel about federal taxation? And clarifying this as the root of the argument. And guess what? You could present the same thing. Hey, in front of a Tesla dealership, how do you feel about federal taxation? Because that's what they're arguing about. And basically, they would be saying, "I am happy with federal taxation. I love helping people, and I'm content with the status quo. I'm just grateful that I get to pay my federal taxes, and I'm happy what the money's going for." And on the right, it's like, "I'm not happy with what my money is being spent for." Left versus right. Happy or not happy with what I'm spending my money on? And do I feel like I'm getting compensated effectively? And that's basically the answer to your question, gaming, Larry. That's basically the expression of what the administration's policy is with regard to recent military actions. Anyhow, what do you think about tapioca? No idea. I don't know what the hell's going on. Let them launch a protocol. I love the idea, but loving the idea is probably most comparable to great tech isn't necessarily a great investment. And in this instance, there is no deployed tech, so there is no potential to evaluate anything. I look forward to something or anything coming from the concept of tapioca, which will be rebranded not as tapioca, and whatever comes of the product that they eventually release, I'm hopeful. But you don't hang your hat on hope. You measure your success on practical realities, what's actually occurring. I think he just meant that they shared their signal group with, well, yeah, but the content of what they were talking about, Bitcoin, the content was interesting, and that's what I tried to break down just now. Gaming Larry, I meant more the fact that they are communicating important military shit. Well, okay. Um, aside from that, I when I saw that, I was like, all right, the content was more interesting. Signal, all right, Signal's pretty cool. Is it secure? How secure? That's another story. That's a separate conversation. That's not the first thing that came to my mind. Okay, so you see, look, I saw a very different thing when I saw that report or headline or story circulating. So you guys saw something very different. What's the takeaway from that? I look at things very differently. I'm not too critical of is it secure? That's a technical question. That's for them to evaluate as administrative officials. That's not my. That's not for me to evaluate. I'm not in their position. So what can we evaluate? The content of conversation. Anyway, that's what we did. Dante's, oh yeah, that also rubbed me the wrong way. Current admin has zero OPSEC, so it's embarrassing. Well, that is a reasonable statement. Can't argue with that. Hope you had a good day, Cap. My question is about tariffs. How do you feel about the trade war against pretty much the entire world? They generally, they generally agree with the concept of reciprocity because that reduces to treat others as you would want to be treated. And that is a foundation of being a good person. And that is a foundation of getting along with people. It's not the same for a nation state because that is an aggregate expression of an entire population. But inarguably, very specific words I choose, inarguably, it's a reasonable policy. As other people are treating us, we treat them equivalently. And frankly, from an economic standpoint, you have the concept of balancing accounts. Accounts should balance for purposes of fairness. These are all very economic terminologies. And when you're talking about numbers, that's a relatively simple thing to express fairness. It's like, is 10 greater than 5? If we're exporting $10 million and they're exporting $20 million, there's a lack of balance there. So these imbalances have tremendous economic effect. So if we're buying $10 million, if we're buying $10 billion worth of goods, you're like, hey guys, we'll buy $10 billion worth of goods. Can you buy $10 billion worth of shit from us too, so we could have a nice balanced economy? I mean, these are kind of reasonable arguments, but these are also arguments that have never been considered, at least by anyone that's 30, 40. I don't know. I can't remember it being discussed in my lifetime. Um, but I think these are reasonable arguments because accounting is such a real thing. But you don't see populist narrative saying, all right, well, what's the accounting? How are the books? Are they healthy? Are things reconciling well? Big accounting word. Because if they're not healthy, that literally affects each and every one of us. So technically, I think policies are reasonable from an accounting standpoint. And that means, and because it's an accounting standpoint, no matter what anyone feels, it's a mathematic, numerical, economic reality. The numbers must balance for economics to actually work. Gaming Larry, thanks for all the answers. Sorry for asking so many. No, these are great questions. Now, I typically don't talk politics because it's such a contentious topic, but as you can see, my responses are relatively neutral. be- Ultimately, because I'm a reductionist and I see the underlying narrative, and that's the perspective that I personally adhere to. And usually, the perspective that I appreciate the most is one that is a truth amongst all sides. It's not an emotional or opinionated position. It's just either a fundamental reality, economics, or altruism versus selflessness versus understanding that you're paying for it. Are you okay with paying for it? Now that would be a contradiction, right? It's like, all right, let's keep USAID open. And by the way, you're paying $10,000, $15,000 a year that's going to it. Are you okay with that money going to it? Now, is has that ever been asked substantially at as a question? Now, separate and apart, is that under would that be received and understood as a question? Because economics are complicated, but that's a fact. If you calculate the percent of money that you're paying on federal taxation, what is going where, based on relative percentages? Are you okay with spending that money on that? And frankly, my position firmly is, unless I get to choose explicitly where I'm spending my money, I'm kind of not okay with it. Now, fortunately, at the state and local level, that kind of does play out. The property tax bill is nicely broken down. Schools, an assessment for a project, or we're paying for some water pipes. I'm like, all right, well, I like that. That's cool. I appreciate the transparency. Or I get a bill in the mail for sewage and water and waste management. I'm like, all right, $150. You can take my garbage. You can take my bulk. Man, you got a lot of complicated water treatment facilities for the local region. It's good payment. But you don't get that bill at the federal level. Like, where's the bill? What are you asking me money for? Now, I appreciate obviously significant services that are provided, Veterans Affairs and the military itself, and a laundry list of shit, including altruistic um, projects and services, and very meaningful law enforcement, very meaningful. Where's the fucking bill? So I could actually know what he's spending the money on, because humans require that kind of acknowledgement. And that's no joke. Like if you're cold called for like donation, or you see on TV an advertisement for a donation to a charity, you're doing it because you understand what the charity is. Usually, when human beings engage in something, they know what they're getting involved with. It's not kind of blanket, just give you a bunch of fucking money and we're going to figure out what to do with your money. It's the bill. It's like going out to a restaurant. How many people go out to a restaurant? Let's say you go out to a restaurant with 10 people and you get a fat bill. Do you look over the bill? Do you make sure it's right? That the money you're about to give over is actually what you ordered? Come on. You, your money is getting spent on the bill. You kind of want to make sure it's decent, correct, and you're allocating the capital to actually what you consumed and purchased. You know what you got, paying for it. That doesn't exist at the federal level. You have no idea what the hell you're getting. It's just, frankly, federal versus state. State is much more granular and local, and federal is straight up. Trust me, bro. Just trust me, bro. We got this. That's probably the best blanket statement for federal taxation. Trust me, bro. Thanks for all the answers. I got you. Lee, why didn't Canada already sell the trade inefficiencies through trade agreement? Well, I have no idea. I'm not in politics and I don't really care to inspect the topic, but I understand the concept of probably what they're trying to do. And as long as they're executing that, I'm okay with it. But clearly, I'm also a rational human being. So if there's something malicious or something unreasonable, I'm not going to be in agreement with an ideology or just anything they choose. You got to be rational amongst everything, right? So who knows? He has now broken that. Well, sounds angry. Good agreement. Do you know that? Do you know people hold firm opinions? What's my point? I don't mean to be critical of what you're saying. What I'm saying is in investing, there's a phrase, strong opinions loosely held. You can have a strong opinion, but what does it really mean? And it's kind of like conspiracy theories. There's people that hear a conspiracy theory and they're like, oh, I knew it. But that's not the way the scientific method works. Scientific method is first you have a hypothesis, you draw information, you form a conclusion, and then you test your conclusion. If you can't test your conclusion, you're like, all right, cool, this is an idea. It's a hypothesis. Technically, all conspiracy theories are very reasonable. They're hypotheses. And if you can't prove one of them, all right, loosely held. All right, it's a good idea. Well, what do I know? What do I actually know? So this comes back to like the concept of serenity. God grant me the strength to change the things I can, be cool with the things that I cannot do anything about, and the wisdom to know the difference. People get upset and frustrated about things they can't do anything about. And the only thing I could offer in that regard is do not try and change things you can't do anything about. So, what's the point in strong opinions over something you can't do anything about? All that does is create anxiety, frustration, because you can't do anything about it. That's freaking frustrating as all hell. So this is everything I'm talking about regarding politics is applicable to investing as well. The only way to engage the world, I'm not even talking about investing, in the morning, in the AM, you need to be cool. You need to be good to go. So this is like meditate, clear your mind, blank slate, engage with one idea at a time, come to solutions, draw conclusions, produce results. So they have to actually be able to produce a result. At the end of the day, human beings only satisfied if they produced results. They achieved what they set out to achieve. Folks are struggling through the day thinking about things that they can't do shit about. That's a that's going to be a day filled with anxiety and frustration. So, food for thought. I don't know, could be wrong. Yeah, but can we do anything about it? I don't know, could be wrong. You said now I've broken that agreement. This is it's so above my fucking pay grade. That's above everyone's pay grade. That's their pay grade. What's the point of having strong opinions about things like that? Don't stress yourself out. I don't know. I'm not too much of I'm a protester. I don't know. More of a what can I actually do to have a positive effect? And that's why I do what I do here. That's why I talk to you guys. It's my only way of having a positive effect. Help you guys learn about how to think about things. Think about things a little different. Be a contrarian. That's what I do. And that's why I tell you guys these stories because I found a way to navigate the most insane financial market on the freaking planet and somehow be calm, cool, and collected with it. Everyone I talk to, and they're like, how old are you? And primarily focus on investing in crypto markets. They're like, how the hell do you do that? It's insane. Well, those meme coins and NFTs, because they don't understand. And then how the hell am I supposed to tell this entire story I've told to you guys over years and a couple of flashy, quick sentences? So it's not so easy. It's taken a long road to get to where we are to be calm, cool, collected in crypto markets. Yet alone this political shit show we call that we experience every day. Political shit show. Because I literally just clarified that the left and the right are arguing about this question that's up here. Here's the receipts. Are you getting what you paid for? That's the question, and the same question that he could ask on both sides. Every argument that anyone could potentially have on the left or the right, deuces to this particular question and the restaurant analogy that I gave you about did you get what you paid for? And if you answer, I have no fucking clue, not necessarily good. Kind of want to know what the hell I'm getting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any further questions from X or YouTube? More than happy to discuss anything on your mind. Technical, is anything left interesting? Damn, Bitcoin 88, that looks good. Pair of 50 cents, very reasonable structure, right below the 100 SMA on the weekly. Be nice to see it push just a little bit above. You breach right above to a 58 level, about 60 cents, give or take. Get back above the 100. The 100's a big deal. And I love this interaction, this hit of the 100 SMA back in March of last year, which is literally 1 year ago, give or take. And a breach to the upside, smack right into the 200 SMA, breach below, and you push back above, you could potentially claim in the future that this was a failed breakdown. This region here could be said to be a failed breakdown, and the breakdown would be invalidated if you come back above, and that's the exact same thing. And this is a resistance. You breach above the 200 SMA. You retest. Hopefully, it's always healthy to have a good retest from the top side down. Maybe a buck 50 down to a buck and a quarter, and that's a previous resistance clip support. So these would be constructive inspections occur from the weekly standpoint. Gold, a little bit of a retrace back to 3006. I think that tune will change as a couple of folks break down very nicely what's going to play out with the TGA, Treasury General Account, and quantitative tightening measures that the Fed implements. Eventually, they're going to stop doing that. Liquidity is just flat out horizontal since 2022. Absolutely remarkable what the Fed has done. Oil 69 constructed below the 200 SMA on the weekly. Stablecoin supply is up and to the right. Absolutely insane what's going on with stablecoin supply. This has got to be the biggest signal through all the noise. Up until if you see a 10x increase in stablecoins, if this trend is any indication of what's coming, that will change and reshape the entire crypto landscape, favoring fintech businesses that actually do business with stablecoins, such as the five businesses in crypto: foreign exchange, credit, derivative, liquidity, financing, and liability printing. Only five businesses in crypto, and they're all dealing with stablecoin. Let's wrap it up for today, Monday, March 24th, 3:59 p.m. I thank you all for joining me. 220 people made it to the end of the stream, and you are all now a little bit more rational because of it. It's only Monday. I'll be back at you later this week on a Wednesday. Until then, be well. Peace.